It started with something so small I almost ignored it. A late text from my wife, saying she'd be stuck at the office finishing a project. Nothing unusual, except for the time. It was nearly midnight. My wife, Elena, had always been ambitious, always eager to impress her boss. But staying that late on a Tuesday? That was new. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, staring at the half-empty glass of wine she'd poured before she left. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But the glass sat there like a symbol of a life paused in the middle of a lie. The first doubt crept in then. The next morning, she came home with the same tailored suit, her hair a little messier than usual, perfume faded but still clinging to her skin. She kissed me on the cheek, her lips cool, her eyes avoiding mine. I felt a pang in my chest that wasn't jealousy, not yet. It was the sting of uncertainty. I didn't say anything. Instead, I watched. And over the next week, the pattern repeated. Late nights, vague excuses, stories that didn't quite add up. One night, when she slipped off her heels and climbed into bed, I noticed a faint mark on her neck, small, reddish, and out of place. She claimed it was from scratching an itch. I nodded, pretending to accept the excuse, but inside, something in me twisted. That's when I decided. I wasn't going to shout, accuse, or beg for answers. I was going to find out the truth myself. Quietly, patiently. And if my suspicions were wrong, no one would ever know. But if I was right, well, I'd make sure she regretted every lie. I spent 2 days researching online, scrolling through forums, reading reviews of devices men like me bought when they wanted answers without confrontation. I finally found what I needed. A GPS tracker no bigger than a lighter, easy to hide, impossible to detect. It synced directly to my phone, updating her every move in real time. When the package arrived, my hands shook as I unboxed it. I told myself I was doing this to protect our marriage, but deep down, I knew the truth. I wanted proof. Proof of what my gut already screamed at me. The first chance I got was Friday night. Elena had another work dinner. She kissed me goodbye, dressed sharper than usual, lipstick a darker shade than I'd seen her wear for months. As soon as the door closed, I slipped out the back, device in hand. I crouched by her car in the dim light of the garage and tucked the tracker under the seat. My heart pounded like I was the one sneaking around. That night, I poured myself another glass of wine and waited. At first, the dot on the map moved exactly as expected, toward her office building downtown. I almost laughed at myself, thinking I'd been paranoid. But then, after 30 minutes, the dot veered off course. She didn't stop at the office. She kept going. My pulse hammered in my ears as I zoomed in on the map. The tracker showed her car parked outside a quiet residential street I didn't recognize. No restaurants. No office buildings. Just houses. I grabbed my keys. The drive there felt endless. Every red light another test of my patience. When I finally turned onto the street, I slowed down, headlights dimmed. And there it was, her car, parked neatly at the curb. I didn't get out right away. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the faint glow of lights behind drawn curtains. Then I saw her silhouette. She was inside, laughing, her body language loose, comfortable, like she belonged. And then another figure appeared. A man, tall, broad-shouldered. He reached out, his hand brushing hers, and she didn't pull away. She leaned closer. I felt the air leave my lungs. It wasn't just the betrayal that crushed me. It was how natural she looked in his presence. The way her lips curved into that playful smile she hadn't given me in months. I stayed there, hidden in the dark, my chest burning. 1,000 thoughts crashed in my head at once. Rage, heartbreak, disbelief. But above all, one cold realization settled deep into me. I had proof now. Real proof. And this was only the beginning. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my side of the bed, the same side I'd kept out of habit for 8 years, listening to the soft tick of the hallway clock and the ghost of her laughter replaying in my head. When Elena slipped in around 2 a.m., she moved carefully, like a dancer in the dark. The mattress dipped under her weight. Her perfume, amber, a trace of orange blossom, folded over me like a memory I couldn't bear to inhale. She kissed my shoulder, a light brush, and whispered, "Sorry, it ran late." I said nothing. If she'd turned on the lamp, she would have seen my open eyes staring at the ceiling. In the morning, I made coffee and placed a cup at her spot, the way I always did. She came down in a silk robe I'd given her last birthday, tied at the waist, a line of skin peeking where the knot loosened. It was the kind of accidental intimacy that used to undo me. How the steam rose between us, how her fingers tucked hair behind her ear. She kept her gaze on her phone. Messages flew by. I caught only their rhythm, not the words. "You're quiet," she said, blowing on her cup. "Big day," I answered. It wasn't a lie. It was the first day I would stop being naive. While she showered, I scrolled through the GPS history. Every pin was a confession she didn't know she'd made. Office. Home. That street. A hotel downtown. Just 30 minutes last Wednesday. Then the residential street again. My thumb hovered over the hotel entry until the screen dimmed, as if my hesitation could will it into something innocent. I reawakened the display and took screenshots, tucking each into a folder I labeled blandly, taxes. At lunch, I forgot my wallet and circled back home. Her closet was a biography written in fabric and metal. I wasn't looking for lipstick-stained collars or notes. I was looking for rhythms. The red dress she wore last night, gone from the usual hanger, now draped over a chair near the window. The heel of a nude pump scuffed in a way that suggested quick movement. A jewelry box lid slightly ajar. I didn't touch anything. I learned from the tracker. Evidence spoke loudest when it remained undisturbed. That evening she texted, "Another late one. Don't wait up." The heart punctured me in a clean, professional way, like a surgeon's cut. I replied with a thumbs up and returned to the map. The dot slid across the city with cheerful indifference and stopped. Not at the office, not at the house from last night, but at a restaurant with mirrored windows and a reputation for dim lighting and long tables. I knew it because we'd once gone there for our anniversary. I still remembered how she'd leaned over the table, eyes soft, asking me whether I ever regretted choosing a quiet life over a louder one. I parked 2 blocks away and walked, collar up, hands in my coat pockets. Through the glass, I found her reflection first. She always found the good light without trying. She sat facing the room, not the window, in a black blouse with a neckline just shy of scandalous. Opposite her sat a man I recognized from her stories as the mentor. His hand didn't touch her, but the air between them looked handled. The waiter brought wine. She laughed, chin tilted. I tasted metal. I didn't storm in. I took a photograph. Then another when his knee brushed hers under the table, and she didn't move it away. The camera shutter felt loud to me, but no one looked. The world goes deaf when desire performs in public. Back home, I built a timeline. Friday, residential street, 2 hours. Wednesday, hotel, 31 minutes. Tonight, restaurant, 94 minutes and counting. The numbers steadied me. Anger was hot. Arithmetic was cool. I realized how starved we'd been even before this began. The way we'd scheduled closeness the way you schedule dentist appointments. We called it maturity, but it was really drought. The thought made me hate both of us a little. Around 11, the dot left the restaurant and drifted to the hotel again. I watched it settle. The first story I told myself was merciful. Maybe she was networking, maybe she felt cornered, maybe he'd insisted. The second story was honest. She had chosen this. She had chosen it with careful lipstick and a blouse that asked a question. I closed my eyes and remembered her body turning toward me in the spring when the windows were open and the neighbors' wind chimes were singing. We'd made half-whispered promises then, the kind you only believe in summer. Those promises now sounded like someone else's language. When she came home after midnight, she slipped under the sheets and rested her hand on my chest. The warmth of it betrayed her. She smelled like mint and hotel air, a sterile coolness that didn't belong in our bedroom. My pulse thudded against her palm. She might have felt the tremor. "You're awake?" she asked. "Yeah. How was your night?" "Uneventful." The word tasted like aspirin. She traced a line over my sternum, slow, suggestive. My body responded out of habit, out of memory, out of hunger, and I hated that it did. I turned my head and kissed her temple, close to her hairline. Chaste, precise, a mark of ownership I no longer claimed. She sighed and pressed closer, her thigh hooking lightly over mine, the silk robe whispering against my skin. A familiar warmth rose between us, a hint of what we had been, and for one fragile second I almost let the past erase the present. "I didn't," I said. "I've got an early meeting," and she retreated with a murmured, "Okay." Turning away, pulling the blanket up like a shield. The next morning, I sent myself an email, subject line insurance. Inside, I pasted the dates, times, screenshots. I printed copies and sealed them in a manila envelope that I labeled with my accountant's name. I wasn't ready to confront her, but I wanted to know that if I vanished, the truth wouldn't. That afternoon, I called a locksmith. Routine tune-up, I said. He changed nothing I asked him to change and everything I meant. By midweek, the GPS had taught me her choreography. Mondays, she really did work late. Tuesdays, the restaurant. Wednesdays, the hotel for a precise, surgical 30 to 40 minutes. No dinner, no drinks, just intention. Thursdays, nothing at all. She came home soft and affectionate, the way a storm sometimes leaves the air strangely sweet. On Friday, the residential street, the house with the blue porch light. That one disturbed me more than the hotel. The hotel was appetite, the house was ritual. I needed to see the house up close. So on Friday, I parked 3 doors down and waited until her silhouette crossed the lit window. The door opened, and the man stepped out to bring in a delivery bag. He was younger than I expected. He wore his hair too proud. When he turned, I caught his profile, handsome in a way that would photograph well, less so in the morning. Inside, she accepted the bag and brushed his wrist the way she used to brush mine when we were new and couldn't finish sentences because our mouths kept finding each other. I remembered the first time she told me I was her home. The house swallowed her and the door closed. I recorded the time. I wrote down the color of the curtains and the number on the mailbox. I took another picture I never wanted to look at again. Somewhere in that hour her hand would unbutton the top of her blouse. Somewhere she would laugh softly, the laugh she claimed I loved most. Somewhere there would be the sounds and gestures of S*** that belonged to me once and now answered to someone else's name. I didn't imagine too hard. Imagination is gasoline. When she came home, I was in the kitchen cooking pasta, the room warm with garlic and olive oil. She kissed me on the neck and teased, "Since when do you cook on Fridays?" "Trying something new," I said. She smiled, curious. She poured wine, took the first sip, and watched me from the side with that feline attention that used to thrill me. She was beautiful. The truth was ugly. Both could be true, I was learning. We ate. She told me a story about a colleague's disastrous presentation, and I laughed in the right places. I asked her about her project's deadline, and she answered without blinking. The lie was fluent. After dinner, she leaned on the counter, hip cocked, eyes sliding down and up with slow appraisal. "We could go to bed early," she said, voice low. The offer was both olive branch and test. I stepped close until my breath moved a strand of hair at her temple. "I have some work," I murmured, brushing my knuckles over her waist. Her skin warmed beneath my touch. She bit her lip and exhaled, that feathered sound that used to undo my resolve. I let my hand fall and stepped back. "Rain check." Something cold flickered behind her eyes, then vanished. "Sure," she said lightly. "Rain check." That night, I moved the GPS from under her seat to the cavity behind the left tail light. Not paranoia, insurance. If she ever took the car in for a detail, the new spot would survive. As I slid the panel back into place, a moth circled the garage bulb in a dumb orbit, beating its wings against the heat again and again. I watched it for longer than made sense. Then I turned the bulb off. The moth tumbled into the dark, freed or lost. I couldn't tell which. Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad. Across the top, I wrote a single sentence: "Revenge requires patience." Under it, I listed 3 headings: financial, professional, personal, like chapters of a book I didn't want to write and now had to. Beneath financial, I wrote separate accounts. Freeze joint credit if necessary. Beneath professional, document relationship with mentor. HR exists for a reason. Beneath personal, I hesitated, then wrote the smallest, cruelest task of all. Make her tell the truth in a room with witnesses. I capped the pen. The house creaked the way old houses do, harmless noises that feel like omens when you want them to. I thought of the envelope in my desk, the locksmith's receipt, the photograph of the blue porch light. I thought of the way her fingers rested on the rim of the wine glass at the restaurant, easy and territorial. I realized I wasn't chasing a single moment of betrayal. I was learning a language she'd been speaking for months. When I finally went upstairs, she was asleep on her side, face turned toward my pillow. I stood there a long time, looking at the person I had once sworn to protect from the world and now had to protect myself from. I slid under the covers without touching her. The distance between us was a paper-thin continent. I stared into the dark and did the hardest thing I'd done yet. I waited. Patience became my weapon. I told myself that every lie Elena fed me was another bead on the string I was collecting. One day, I'd wrap it around her neck. Until then, I needed more than suspicion. I needed patterns, rhythms, a map of her betrayals. By the third week of watching the tracker, I could predict her movements better than she could. Monday nights were almost clean. She stayed at the office past 10, came home tired, collapsed into bed. Tuesdays were her networking nights, usually the restaurant with the minter, sometimes lingering at the hotel after. Wednesdays were surgical, 30 to 40 minutes at that same hotel, in and out like clockwork, no drinks, no excuses. Thursdays she came home early, cooking elaborate dinners and touching me more than usual, as if guilt sharpened her appetite for affection. And Fridays. Fridays were reserved for the man in the house with the blue porch light. I hated that I knew these things. I hated more that I couldn't stop wanting to know. Knowledge burned in me like poison and medicine at once. The Friday following my last stakeout, I sat outside the house again. The blue light hummed faintly above the door, like an omen. I watched her car roll up, watched her slip inside, and this time, I didn't stay in the shadows. I moved closer, keeping to the trees. Through a narrow gap in the curtains, I caught glimpses. Her coat falling from her shoulders, his arms around her waist. Their lips meeting like this was routine. Not lust alone, but something rehearsed. It chilled me more than raw desire. I couldn't stop myself. I raised my phone and recorded 30 seconds. Her laugh, her body leaning into his hand sliding lower than any friend's hand should. Proof. The video file sat heavy in my palm, as if it carried the weight of our entire marriage. I went back to my car and sat there, the engine off, my reflection in the windshield looking older than I remembered. I thought about storming in. I thought about dragging her out by the wrist, shoving the phone in her face, demanding answers. But then what? She'd cry, she'd deny, she'd twist the story. If I wanted her to feel the full weight of this, exposure had to be absolute. No way out. No more stories. That night, when she returned home, she was glowing. She walked lighter, smiled more. She leaned across the couch, her silk blouse slipping down one shoulder, and asked, "Movie?" Her voice was honey. My stomach clenched. I nodded, sat beside her, and let her rest her head against me. I smelled his cologne faintly on her hair. Every second felt like a blade pressed against my skin. The next morning, I started digging deeper into her digital world. I knew her phone password. She once told me it, laughing, because what's mine is yours. I waited until she showered and picked it up. My heart thudded in my ears as I scrolled. Most of her texts with him were deleted. But not all. A few stray messages clung to the edges. Same time Wednesday. Missed last night already. Don't forget the wine. I screenshotted them all and emailed them to myself under another bland subject line, utilities. I also noticed a second messaging app she never used with me. It was locked. I didn't dare push further then, but it planted a seed. If she was careful enough to hide one channel, there might be others. That night, I tested something. While we lay in bed, I let my hand drift along her hip, slow, familiar, the way she used to melt into. She stiffened for a second, then softened, turning toward me. Her lips parted, her breath warm, her body arching closer. But something was wrong. The rhythm between us was broken, as if she were replaying another performance in her head. I kissed her neck, and she sighed, but it sounded practiced, rehearsed. My body reacted despite the anger coiling inside me, but my mind was detached, cold. When it was over, she curled against me and whispered, "See, we're still good." I lay awake long after she fell asleep, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail. That wasn't closeness. That was damage control. The following week, the tracker gave me something new. Tuesday night, she left the restaurant but didn't head to the hotel. Instead, she drove to a high-rise downtown. She stayed there for 2 hours. I parked nearby, craning my neck at the lit windows, trying to guess which one held her silhouette. When she finally emerged, her hair was loose, her blouse untucked. She looked satisfied. I followed her car at a distance, careful, until she merged back toward our neighborhood. My chest tightened with every turn. I realized I wasn't just collecting evidence anymore. I was testing myself, measuring how much betrayal I could swallow before breaking. That night, when she crawled into bed, she kissed my shoulder and whispered, "Long day. Glad it's over." Her hand lingered on my chest, sliding lower, as if offering peace. My body responded out of instinct, but my mind stayed locked on the GPS map still glowing in my pocket. I knew then this wasn't about catching her in the act. I had already caught her. This was about choosing when to set fire to her carefully built lies. Timing was everything. One wrong move, and she'd wriggle out of it, paint me paranoid. But if I waited, if I gathered every thread until she was tangled completely, then I could pull it all at once. So I kissed her back, smiled in the dark, and whispered, "I'm glad too." She didn't know that every breath we shared was now part of my quiet haunt. I learned the art of stillness. If patience was my weapon, stillness was the sheath that hid it. I moved through our house like a courteous stranger, opening doors for Elena, pouring her coffee, asking about her day. Inside, I was stringing wire across a dark room. All I needed was for her to trip. The first stage of exposure had to look like coincidence. If I came at her head-on, she'd swerve. So I started small. At breakfast, I mentioned a colleague's HR scandal. Minter, minty, blurred lines. It's a shame when talented people ruin their own careers. I didn't look up when I said it. The spoon paused in her bowl a fraction too long before clinking again. It was a quiet music, fear in E minor. Tuesday arrived, and with it the predictable networking dinner. I kissed her cheek and told her she looked fierce. She smiled, but her eyes stayed cautious, like a swimmer measuring the current. As soon as she left, I printed my timeline, dates, locations, screenshots, on a plain paper and slid it into a neutral blue folder. No drama, just ink and silence. I tucked the folder into my work bag, not to confront her yet, but to feel its weight. Proof changes posture. I wanted to carry that change. At the restaurant, I took a seat at the bar with a view of the mirrored wall. I didn't look at her directly. I watched her as a reflection, her tilt toward him, his hand hovering near hers without resting. The slow choreography of a pair that believes the room is theirs. The bartender asked if I was waiting for someone. "Just a moment," I said, and snapped a single photo of the reflection. Two ghosts convincing each other they were real. They left separately. She headed for the elevator to the garage. He walked out to the street and took a ride share. I followed him instead of her. Curiosity outweighed rage, always more dangerous. He lived in a high-rise with a lobby that smelled like lemon and money. When he stepped into the elevator, I didn't enter. I memorized the floor he pressed. 23. I repeated the number under my breath like a spell and walked back into the night. At home, Elena was already in bed reading, a silk strap on her shoulder slipping like a secret. "You're late," she murmured, closing her book. I could see the outline of her through the thin nightgown, the curve that used to make me abandon sentences mid-word. She lifted the blanket. "Come here." I did, and for a while there was nothing but warmth and skin and the old gravity that pulled us together. The room smelled like linen and her honeyed perfume. My hand found her waist, her breath quickened against my throat, and the way she arched to meet me made the world narrow to a single point. But there was a crack in the moment. When my mouth grazed her collarbone, the sound she made belonged to a recording. Perfect, timed, a performance calibrated for someone else's applause. I answered anyway, half-starved, half-studying, and when it ended she sighed with a satisfied little hum that felt like punctuation. After, she curled around me, tracing idle patterns on my chest. "We're good, aren't we?" she asked. The question wore a wedding ring and a blindfold. "We're fine," I said. The truth would arrive later and with witnesses. The next morning, I called an old friend, Nora, who worked in compliance at Elena's company. I asked for coffee under the pretense of exploring a career change. We met at a cafe that smelled like toasted sugar. I kept my questions general: policies, training, the company's obsession with optics. "They're rigorous," she said. "Ever since that board mess last year, they document everything. If someone sneezes near a conflict of interest, we keep the tissue." I laughed, then steered the conversation. "What about mentor relationships? Any protections?" "Mandatory disclosures," she said. "Quarterly certifications. If people are stupid, we catch them." She stirred her drink, squinting. "You okay? You look like you're rehearsing something." I trusted Nora enough to be vague and exact at once. Let's say I was worried a friend might be in a situation that could expose the company. She set the spoon down. If your friend needs to talk off the record, I'm around. Not yet, I said. Soon. On Thursday, Elena came home early with groceries, bright and domestic, and made pasta puttanesca like it was an apology in red sauce. She moved around the kitchen confidently, hips swaying with the rhythm of knives and sizzle. Taste, she said, lifting the spoon to my lips. The brine of olives, the heat of pepper. My body remembered joy and wanted to be generous. She laughed when I stole a kiss, and for a moment I saw the woman I married. Summer light, bare feet on tile, our futures unwritten. Then her phone buzzed face down on the counter, and the spell fractured. She didn't check it. That was the tell. People in love glance. Later, I began to pull the first real thread. I created an email from a burner address and wrote to the younger man, the blue porch light. No accusation. Just doubt shaped like kindness. You don't know me. You should. Be careful who promises you forever on Friday nights. Some rings don't come off, even when hands are elsewhere. I attached the 30-second video, edited to remove everything but the unmistakable. No names. No dates. Just truth under low light. I hit send and felt nothing heroic. Only colder. 2 hours later, the tracker had left his street earlier than usual. An hour after that, Elena emerged from our shower with eyes rimmed pink and a towel turbaned on her head. Hot water, she said lightly, as if explaining something ordinary. She dressed without perfume and went to bed with her back to me. A beginning. Friday, I pulled the second thread. At lunch, I walked into Elena's building, blue folder in hand, and asked for the mentor by name. The receptionist smiled professionally. He's in a meeting. Do you have an appointment? Just dropping off documents he requested, I said, and slid a plain envelope across the desk. Inside were anonymized calendar screenshots, 2 receipts from the hotel bar, and a copy of the company's policy Nora had emailed me from a public link. On the outside, I had written a single line. Disclose before it's disclosed for you. I didn't wait to see it delivered. The point wasn't to watch him read. It was to tighten the air around them both. That night, Elena didn't go out. She poured wine and tried to start 3 different conversations, each more frantic than the last. I indulged them gently, then suggested a movie. Halfway through, she paused the screen and turned to me. Are we okay? We are, I said, and we will be. A promise and a verdict. When we went to bed, she rolled toward me with intent, fingers slipping under my shirt, breath warm and searching. I let the attraction pull us into heat and friction, into a familiar tide that made reason sway. Her thigh slid over mine. She whispered my name the way she used to, like it was a key. And for a dizzy minute, I wanted to live in the lie with her if it meant keeping this body, this warmth, this memory of us. Then, the smallest tell again. Eyes open when they used to close, a beat skipped in the rhythm, the faint echo of a script written elsewhere. Desire is honest, performance is not. I kissed her slow and deep until the performance forgot its lines, and something real flickered back. When we finished, she held me as if she were the one afraid I'd vanish. I let her fall asleep first. In the dark, I opened my phone and watched the map of our city glow. Tomorrow I'd move to stage 2. Names, times, the dinner where worlds meet. For now, I lay beside her, listening to the soft, human sound of her breathing, and felt both love and a measured cruelty occupying the same ribcage. Revenge wasn't the shout I'd imagined. It was the softest pull on a single thread, again and again, until the dress fell off in a whisper no one could deny. The first time the GPS betrayed her, I told myself it could be a mistake, an error in the signal, a coincidence, something explainable if I stretched belief thin enough. But by the time the second man appeared in her orbit, I knew there was no stretching left. My wife wasn't living one lie. She was living 2. It happened on a Wednesday, one of her surgical nights. Normally, her car lingered at the downtown hotel for no more than 40 minutes. Precise, efficient, like a doctor performing a procedure. But that night, the dive veered across town, past the hotel, and into a residential district I'd never seen on her routes. My breath tightened. Change always meant escalation. I followed at a distance, headlights dimmed, a shadow trailing her taillights. She parked outside a townhouse, modern brick and glass, the kind of place bought by people trying to prove they'd arrived. She stepped out of the car wearing jeans and a simple blouse, not her usual tailored armor. She carried no work bag, just her purse, light enough to hold a phone, keys, maybe lip gloss. Nothing about her said meeting. Everything about her said home. I stayed in my car until a figure opened the door from inside. Not the mentor. Younger. Late 20s maybe. Hair too neat, smile too eager. He kissed her cheek like it was habit, not novelty. She brushed past him into the house, her body language fluid, relaxed. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was routine. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went pale. Betrayal was one thing. Multiplicity was another. She wasn't simply unfaithful. She was compartmentalized. With me, she was the wife. With the mentor, she was the ambitious protege. With this boy, she was what? A fantasy of freedom? A lover without baggage. The thought sliced through me, jagged and uneven. I wrote the time in my notebook, 8:14 p.m. Then again when the door opened at 10:03 and she left, her hair slightly undone, blouse wrinkled at the waist. She kissed him at the threshold, long, unhurried, with a tenderness that stung worse than lust. She walked to her car as if nothing in the world were fragile. I didn't confront her when she came home that night. She tossed her keys on the counter, kissed me lightly, and murmured, exhausted. I studied her face in the kitchen light, searching for cracks. She smiled, touched my cheek, and disappeared upstairs. In bed, she curled against me, her warmth as familiar as it was foreign. She rested her thigh across mine, her body pressing close in that half-asleep intimacy that usually made me surrender. This time, my body betrayed me again, responding to her touch even as my mind screamed with images of her in someone else's sheets. She whispered, I missed you, her breath hot against my neck. For a second, I almost believed her. Almost. The next morning, I began cross-referencing. GPS data from Tuesday matched the mentor. Wednesday matched the townhouse boy. Friday, of course, was the house with the blue porch light. 3 men. 3 sets of lies. My wife wasn't cheating on me. She was curating a collection. The rage that should have exploded instead condensed into something harder, sharper. This wasn't about sex alone. This was about identity. She had fractured herself into roles, the corporate darling, the weekend sweetheart, the loyal wife at home. I wondered which one she liked best, or if any of them were real. That weekend, I staged an experiment. I suggested a spontaneous getaway, just the 2 of us, a cabin by the lake. Her smile was quick, her refusal quicker. I'd love to, but the timing's terrible. Big project. Maybe in a month? Translation: she couldn't abandon her rotation. She needed her schedule of lies to survive. That night, when she showered, I picked up her phone again. She had grown cautious, deleting almost everything, but she slipped once. A single message from the boy at the townhouse. Friday instead? I can't wait that long. She had replied with a heart emoji. Not words. Just a symbol, but it told me everything. I forwarded the message to my email and deleted the evidence of my theft. Then I sat in the dark, staring at the glow of my laptop, the folder of screenshots and videos growing thicker. My proof was now undeniable, indisputable. And yet, proof wasn't enough. Exposure had to be perfect, timed like a blade through fabric. The mentor had his reputation. The boy had his naive hope. And Elena, she had me, the husband she assumed was blind. The double life wasn't double anymore. It was triple, and that meant one thing. When I pulled the string, the collapse would be catastrophic. That night, she slipped into bed late, damp hair smelling of lavender shampoo. She pressed against me, lips brushing my shoulder. I turned, kissed her back, and let my hand slide down her spine. She shivered, responded, her body warming under mine. For a moment, the desire between us sparked alive, raw and magnetic, almost enough to erase the other men from my mind. Almost. But when she moaned softly, my chest clenched. Was that sound for me? Or was I just another rehearsal in her endless play? I finished what she started, left her panting against the pillow, and whispered, "We're good, aren't we?" Her voice was breathless, certain, always. And I smiled in the dark, because I knew her always was running out. By the time the 6th week rolled around, I could have drawn Elena's lies on a calendar with a Sharpie. Mondays, she played the exhausted professional. Tuesdays, she polished her ambition with the mentor at dinner. Wednesdays, She gave herself to the boy in the townhouse. Fridays, she worshipped under the blue porch light. Thursday was my night, the husband's night, where she cooked, laughed, kissed me too deeply, and tried to remind me that she belonged here. It was almost elegant, the symmetry of it. Almost. But cracks began to show when I studied how she carried herself with each man. With the Minter, she played the ambitious student. I'd seen her posture at that restaurant. Upright, alert, her eyes bright with admiration. She leaned in as though his words carried gospel. Her texts to him, what little she left behind, were sharp, filled with references to meetings, deals. We'll celebrate when it closes. She fed his ego with the promise of youth and admiration. With the boy in the townhouse, she softened. The one surviving text thread read like teenagers hiding from parents. Miss you already. Wish you didn't have to go home. Her reply, soon. Promise. That word, promise, haunted me. She gave him devotion, the illusion of exclusivity, while wearing another man's ring. She wore jeans with him, not pencil skirts. She played the dream girlfriend, not the professional. And then the blue porch light man. He was different. Older than the boy, younger than the mentor. He didn't seem to want promises or business wins. Their meetings were longer, slower. 2 hours stretched into 4. When I'd followed her the previous Friday, I saw them sitting close, heads touching, watching something on a laptop. It wasn't just lust. It was intimacy. He was her safe place. He believed he'd won her heart. 3 men, 3 masks. And me, the husband she thought too blind to notice. I didn't feel jealousy anymore. I felt fascination. She had built a system, a rotation, as if she were a queen managing courtiers. And like any system, it could be broken by introducing chaos. The first step was to tighten the noose. I upgraded the GPS tracker to one with audio capability. It picked up muffled conversations, enough to paint fuller portraits of her performances. With the Minter, her tone was coy, playful but restrained. With the boy, her voice dipped into softness, girlish laughter bubbling through. With the porch light man, she was steady, tender, the sound of her murmurs enough to make me close my eyes and remember when that voice was mine. I documented everything. I created 3 separate folders, each labeled with an initial, M, B, P. Each folder thickened with screenshots, audio clips, GPS logs, and photographs. The evidence wasn't for me anymore. It was for them. Because my plan had shifted. It wasn't enough for me to know. They had to know each other. The men had to see the full map of her deceit. If she had played them as roles in her theater, then I would seat them in the same audience and let her perform with nowhere to hide. But before I moved to exposure, I tested her boundaries. One Thursday night, over dinner, I asked casually, do you ever feel stretched too thin? Like juggling too many expectations at once? Her fork paused midair. For a heartbeat, I thought she'd choke on the implication. But she recovered quickly, smiling. Of course, everyone does. That's why balance matters. Balance, I echoed, like living different lives at once. She laughed lightly, but her eyes flickered. A crack. She kissed my cheek, too quick, and said, that's marriage. We all wear different hats. I nodded. Inside, I felt a grim satisfaction. She wasn't just hiding lies. She was normalizing them. That weekend, I attended a company event with her. The mentor was there. I watched them from across the room. The way she touched his arm as she laughed, the way he leaned in, proud and possessive. Around colleagues, they behaved carefully, but their eyes betrayed something deeper. I introduced myself, shaking his hand firmly. I've heard a lot about you, I said, smiling. Likewise, he replied, though his eyes flickered with something like discomfort. I held his gaze for a fraction too long before turning to Elena. She looked pale, her lipstick too bright under the lights. She excused us quickly, pulling me toward the bar. He's just a mentor, she whispered fiercely. Of course, I said. That's what you've always told me. The truth was, I didn't need his confirmation. Her body told me enough. That night, when she tried to initiate closeness, I let her. Her lips traced my neck. Her breath came hot and urgent, her body pressing against mine with a hunger that felt almost desperate. I responded, meeting her intensity, but my mind stayed detached, watching her as if she were a stranger performing in my bed. She moaned my name, nails digging into my shoulders, but the sound rang hollow. I wondered if she closed her eyes and imagined someone else. When it was over, She clung to me. "We're good, right?" she asked again. Always the same refrain, like a child begging for reassurance. I kissed her forehead. "We're perfect." And I smiled in the dark, knowing that soon she would realize perfection was the sharpest blade. Because I was no longer waiting for proof. I was weaving the web that would bind her. The dinner was coming. And when it did, all her masks would fall at once. The idea of revenge didn't come to me all at once. It unfolded slowly, like a photograph in a darkroom, lines appearing in faint detail until the whole picture stood clear. By the 7th week, I had stopped thinking of myself as a betrayed husband and started thinking like an architect. Every building needs a foundation, and mine would be built on patience and silence. I already had the evidence. Screenshots, recordings, GPS logs, photographs. They were bricks stacked neatly in digital folders. But bricks alone don't make a building. They needed mortar. The mortar would be timing. I wanted Elena's worlds to collide. Each man believed he knew her, believed the version of her she handed him was authentic. If I could bring them together in one place, strip away the masks, she would collapse under her own performance. And I would be the one holding the curtain rope. The first step was contact. The boy at the townhouse had already received my anonymous email with the video clip. His behavior changed almost immediately. The following week, Elena's car stayed parked at his place for less than an hour. I imagined the questions he must have asked her, the excuses she must have spun. But doubt lingers. Doubt doesn't go away with a kiss. It festers. The porch light man was harder. He seemed grounded, older, less likely to crumble at a single image. So I gave him words instead. Another email, this time signed with a fabricated name. "Do you know who she spends her Wednesdays with? Do you know what she promises him while she's telling you you're her everything? Look closer. You deserve the truth." I didn't attach evidence. Not yet. Let his imagination fill the gaps. Imagination can be crueler than proof. As for the mentor, I didn't need to write him. His career was the pressure point. A man like him, polished and careful, feared exposure more than heartbreak. All I had to do was let him feel eyes on him. At the next company mixer, I shook his hand again, smiling too long, letting silence stretch until he looked away. The paranoia would bloom on its own. Meanwhile, at home, Elena tried harder. She cooked my favorite meals, draped herself over me in bed, touched me with a hunger that almost convinced me. One Thursday, she wore the black silk slip I hadn't seen since our honeymoon. She slid beside me, her hand traveling down, her lips finding my ear. "Remember us?" she whispered. I wanted her. God, I wanted her. My body responded like it always had, betrayal of another kind. Her skin was warm, her scent intoxicating, her breath quickened as I pressed against her. For a moment, I closed my eyes and pretended we were still untouched by lies. But even in the heat of it, I couldn't silence the question. Who else had she worn this slip for? Who else had she whispered to with this voice? When she moaned my name, I kissed her hard, almost rough, not out of love but out of reclamation. She shuddered under me, clinging tighter, and for a fleeting second I thought she might break down and confess everything. But when it was over, she only smiled and said, "See, we're unshakable." I smiled back. "Yes," I whispered, "unshakable." That night, I drafted the final stage of my plan, the dinner. I reserved a private room at the same restaurant where she often met the mentor. I used different numbers, different names, to extend 3 invitations. For the boy, a message sent from another burner account. "If you want the truth about Elena, come to the restaurant Friday at 8. Bring your questions." For the porch light man, "She's lied to you too. If you want proof, meet me at the restaurant Friday at 8. And for the mentor, I sent a plain white envelope to his office desk. Friday, 8 p.m. Private room at Leontine's. Come alone. You'll understand why. I timed it perfectly. Friday, her porch light night. She'd have no excuse for refusing a work dinner. And when she walked in expecting one man, she would find all of them. For days, I rehearsed the moment in my mind. How she'd enter, her smile ready, only for it to falter when she saw the 3 faces waiting. How the silence would stretch, thick and damning. How I would sit at the head of the table, calm as a judge, letting her scramble for words. The anticipation was almost sweet. I found myself calmer at work, polite with strangers, even affectionate toward Elena in small ways. She mistook it for reconciliation. "I feel like we're finding each other again," she said one morning, brushing my hand at breakfast. I kissed her knuckles. Yes, I said. We're closer than ever. She didn't know closeness could feel like a trap closing. On the Thursday night before the dinner, I watched her sleep beside me, her breathing even, her face serene. She looked innocent in dreams, untouched by her own chaos. I almost pitied her. Almost. Because tomorrow night, the theater she built would burn, and I would be the one lighting the match. Friday arrived with the weight of a storm, heavy and inevitable. Elena dressed carefully that evening, choosing a crimson blouse I hadn't seen in years. She paired it with black heels, her hair swept back in a way that made her look like the woman I'd fallen in love with. As she applied lipstick at the hallway mirror, I watched her reflection. She smiled faintly, as if proud of herself for keeping so many lives spinning. Another late night? I asked casually, adjusting my cufflinks. She winked. Don't wait up. I'll make it up to you tomorrow. I kissed her cheek and let her leave. Her perfume lingered in the hall after the door shut, sweet and sharp, like a lie disguised as affection. At 7:50, I entered the private room at Leontine's. The table gleamed under low lighting, the air scented with oak and wine. I took the seat at the head, my blue folder resting beside my glass of water. One by one, the men arrived. First came the boy from the townhouse. His eyes darted nervously, his youth written all over his posture. He scanned the room, spotted me, and frowned. Who are you? Sit, I said evenly. You'll find out soon enough. Then came the porch light man, older, calmer, but suspicion darkened his face. He paused at the doorway, his gaze flicking from me to the boy. What is this? Answers, I told him. Finally, at precisely 8:02, the mentor entered. He carried himself like a man used to command, but when his eyes fell on me, then the others, a shadow of recognition passed over his face. He didn't sit immediately. What the hell is going on here? Patience, I said. The door opened again. Elena stepped inside, her heels clicking softly on the wooden floor. She smiled, radiant and rehearsed, until her eyes registered the room. 3 men, 1 husband. Silence. Her smile faltered, then collapsed entirely. Elena, I said, gesturing to the empty seat. Join us. Her throat worked as she swallowed. What is this? This, I said, sliding the blue folder onto the table, is your stage collapsing. The boy looked at her with wide, wounded eyes. You told me you weren't married. His voice cracked. You said you were leaving someone else, not. The porch light man interrupted, his tone bitter. She told me I was her only anchor, that she'd finally found someone steady. He leaned back in his chair, disgust plain on his face. The mentor said nothing at first, his jaw tight. Then, low and venomous, you're insane. Do you know what this could do to me? Elena's eyes darted from man to man, panic rising. She reached for words, but I opened the folder before she could speak. I slid photographs across the table, her laughing with the mentor at dinner, her kissing the boy at the townhouse door, her curled tenderly against the porch light man's shoulder. Screenshots followed, text threads, GPS logs. Evidence lined the wood grain like cards in a losing hand. Her hands trembled as she reached for one photo, and stopped. You don't understand. No, I said, my voice calm, steady, cold. We understand perfectly. You've been living 3 different lives, Elena. Wife, protege, girlfriend. And tonight, they all came home at once. The boy pushed back from the table, his chair scraping. I can't believe this. I gave you everything. And you, his voice broke. He stormed out, the door slamming behind him. The porch light man stood more slowly. His disappointment cut deeper than anger. You made me believe in you, he said quietly. That's the cruelest part. He turned and left without another glance. The mentor sat frozen, his knuckles white around his glass. He hissed under his breath, You've ruined me. Then he rose, fury in every line of his body, and left the room. That left only us. Elena sat, shoulders slumped, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this to me? Because you already did it to yourself, I said. I reached into my pocket and placed the GPS tracker on the table. This told me everything you wouldn't. And now it's all out in the open. She stared at the device as if it were a weapon. Maybe it was. For the first time in weeks, I felt no anger. Only release. My silence had been heavier than rage, but now it was gone, replaced by a calm finality. I stood, This dinner was for you, Elena. To meet the versions of yourself you thought you could keep separate. Her lips parted, searching for words, for an excuse, for a plea. But nothing came. I left her sitting there in that room, surrounded by the ruins of her theater. And as I stepped into the cool night air, I knew the performance was over. I didn't go home right away after the dinner. I walked the long way through streets that smelled like rain and car exhaust, letting the city rinse the noise out of my head. By the time I reached our block, the quiet felt ceremonial, like the hush after a curtain falls. The house waited with its familiar silhouette, every window a square of darkness I used to call peace. Elena's car wasn't in the driveway. Habit made my eyes search for it before I remembered. She'd arrived with the minter and left with nothing. A fitting symmetry, I thought, and unlocked the door. She was already inside. I found her in the kitchen, elbows on the counter, the crimson blouse now wrinkled, lipstick smudged into something too vulnerable to be war paint. When she looked up, her eyes were raw. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why humiliate me like that?" I set my keys down, lined them neatly, and poured a glass of water I didn't drink. "I didn't humiliate you," I said. "I introduced you to your audience." Her laugh cracked. "So this is revenge." "This," I said, "is consequence." She moved around the counter slowly, as if approaching a skittish animal. When she reached me, she lifted a hand to my chest, palm warm through my shirt. Her voice went low, the way it did when she wanted the world to shrink to two people. "We can fix this. We can go away for a while, let it cool down. You still love me. I know you do." Love is a muscle memory. My body betrayed me, leaning into her warmth, registering the curve of her waist. The scent of her perfume turned saltier by tears. When she rose on tiptoe and brushed her mouth against my throat, the electric thread between us snapped taut. For a second, a dangerous part of me wanted to let it pull us into the old orbit, into S*** without questions, heat as language, denial as lullaby. I put my hands on her shoulders and eased her back. "No," I said quietly. "Not tonight. Not like this." Her eyes flashed. "What do you want then? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I lost myself." She swallowed. "I was afraid of being only one thing. It got out of control." "You were three things," I said, "and none of them honest." She flinched as if the word had weight. "I'll make it right. I'll call them. I'll undo it." "You can't undo it," I said, and reached into my pocket. The GPS tracker clicked against the counter when I set it down. She stared at it as if it might start blinking. I slid a second item beside it, a set of keys on a thin metal ring. Not hers. Mine. "Your car," I said, "is gone." Her confusion arrived before the fear. "What?" "I sold it last week." I kept my voice even. "We had equity. The market's good." I kept the tracker, souvenir of a language I had to learn. "The title's transferred. Payment cleared this morning." She blinked once, twice, like a camera trying to focus. "You sold my car." The words found heat. "That was mine." "It was ours," I corrected. "Purchased with joint funds. The proceeds are in a separate account you can't touch." Her mouth opened, closed. She pivoted to the next lifeline. "We'll use the joint account until—" "It's frozen," I said. "Credit lines suspended, cards paused. Mortgage and utilities set to auto-draft from a reserve I control. You'll have what you need until we separate assets formally. Nothing extraneous." She stepped back as if the floor had moved. Anger flushed into her cheeks. "You planned this." "For weeks," I said, "while you planned your nights." She turned to the sink and gripped the edge so hard her knuckles blanched. Her shoulders shook once with a sound that wasn't quite a sob. When she faced me again, the fury was gone. In its place was the oldest weapon she owned, softness. She came close, took my hand, and pressed it to her waist, then higher, guiding, reminding. "Please," she whispered, eyes glossy. "Let's stop being cruel to each other. I'm still yours." The ache that rose in me was primitive. My thumb found the dip at her hip. Her breath hitched. The room tilted toward heat. I could have taken her then, against the counter, against the history that remembered how. She leaned in, mouth parting, and for one suspended heartbeat the past and present overlapped. Two transparencies misaligned, but still legible. I lowered my hand. "You keep using the word ours when you want something," I said, stepping away. "Tonight proved how many definitions you carry in your mouth." She hugged her arms to her ribs, suddenly small. What happens now? I took the blue folder from my bag and placed it on the counter between us. Now you read this. Then you pack a bag and stay at your sister's for a week. I've already arranged time with a mediator. I'll handle the HR disclosures with your company. There's a record you should probably make before someone else does. I slid a printout across to her, the policy Nora had sent me. You'll find the language familiar. Her gaze skimmed the page, then ricocheted back to me. You would go to HR? I would go to the truth, I said. It's more patient than both of us. She opened the folder with trembling hands. The first photo showed her laughing with the mentor, the second caught her kiss at the townhouse door, the third framed her curled against the porch light man's shoulder. Beneath them, timestamps. She turned a page, then another, slower, like someone descending a staircase in the dark, waiting for a missing step that never comes. When she reached the screen captures of her messages, she winced as if cut. Did you ever? She stopped, tried again. Was any of this my fault to you before it happened? Did I fail you first? I don't know when the rot began, I said honestly. I know when I saw it. She shut the folder and held it to her chest, as if it might warm her. The room hummed with the refrigerator's patient drone. Outside, a car passed, the sound thinning quickly into night. She drew a breath that sounded like surrender. I'll go to my sister's. Take the guest key, I said. Your phone service will continue. I'm not trying to strand you. I'm trying to stop the bleeding. She nodded, then surprised me by stepping close and pressing her forehead to mine, an old gesture from a younger life. I did love you, she whispered, even when I was breaking us. Some part of me. I know, I said because I did. Love had been present like oxygen, invisible, necessary, easy to take for granted, easy to poison. She kissed me once, soft, almost chaste, the kind of kiss couples give in hospitals and airports. My body answered with a ghost of heat and the certainty that this was an ending made of mercy rather than fire. She pulled back and wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. Will you be okay? Yes, I said, because I chose to be. She packed quietly. I stood in the doorway and watched her choose items with the care of someone leaving a museum after hours. No quick movements, no alarms. When she reached for the jewelry box, she paused, then closed it and left it on the dresser. On her way out, she put the spare key on the hall table and glanced at the empty space in the driveway that used to be her car. You really sold it, she murmured, half to herself. I really did. She looked at me a long time, as if memorizing a painting. Goodbye, then. For now, I said. When the door closed, the house expanded around the silence like lungs filling. I walked back to the kitchen, picked up the little tracker, and rolled it in my palm. It was weightless. It felt like a stone. I set it on the counter and turned off the lights. In the dark, the outline of the room became crisp, honest, the way truth looks when you stop trying to decorate it. Tomorrow, there would be paperwork, calls, the careful architecture of an ending. Tonight, there was only the sound of my own breathing and the quiet knowledge that revenge, done properly, doesn't roar. It clicks. A door shutting. A key returning. A car that will not pull into the drive again. The morning after Elena left, I woke to a house that finally matched my pulse. Quiet, steady mine. The sun spilled across the kitchen tiles, unbroken by her heels clicking, her voice calling out a rushed goodbye. The silence wasn't lonely, it was clean. I brewed coffee and drank it slowly, tasting freedom in every bitter sip. She had called once in the night. I let it ring. A message waited in my voicemail now, but I didn't listen. I didn't need to. I already knew the script. Apologies wrapped in half-truths, promises dressed as pleas. My revenge was finished, and with it, the need for her voice. Later that day, her sister texted me. She's here. She's quiet. Don't worry. I typed a polite thank you and nothing else. Elena wasn't my problem anymore. I spent that Saturday gathering the remnants of her presence. The hairbrush on the vanity, the spare perfume bottle in the bathroom, the silk slip tangled in the laundry. I folded it all into boxes labeled with her name. Not out of malice, but order. Order had always been my anchor, and now it was my shield. When I carried the last box to the garage, I caught myself staring at the empty space where her car used to sit. That vehicle had ferried her to 3 different lives, each lie woven into its upholstery. Now it was gone, scrubbed from our story, a transaction recorded in a bank account she couldn't touch. A ghost erased. The tracker lay on my desk, its matte casing dull in the afternoon light. I turned it over in my palm, listening to the faint click of its shell. This little device had been the scalpel that cut open her illusions. I thought about throwing it away, but then I slipped it into a drawer instead, not as a keepsake of her betrayal, but as a reminder of my patience. In the weeks that followed, the fallout spread like ripples. The boy at the townhouse blocked her number. An acquaintance told me he'd moved out entirely, vanishing into a fresh start. The porch light man changed the bulb outside his house. One evening I drove by and saw it glowing white instead of blue. A small act, but final. As for the mentor, whispers reached me through Nora. An internal review, a sudden leave of absence, the edges of a career fraying. Elena had been his weakness, and I had simply let the world know. She tried to reach me 3 times, 2 texts, 1 handwritten note slipped through the mail slot. The texts I deleted unread. The note I burned in the sink, the paper curling into ash under a match. Revenge wasn't just about exposing her. It was about refusing to give her stage time in my life anymore. And yet, some nights, lying in the wide bed, I felt the echo of her body curling into mine, the warmth of her thigh over my leg, the whisper of her lips on my neck. Desire is honest, even when love has rotted. But the echo always faded, replaced by the image of her face in that restaurant. The shock, the unraveling, the collapse. That memory steadied me better than any embrace. The mediator sessions went smoothly. She signed the papers with shaking hands, eyes avoiding mine. I signed with steady strokes, each letter a nail in the coffin of our marriage. When it was over, she whispered, "I did love you, you know." "I know," I said, my tone as neutral as ink. And I walked away without looking back. On the final night in our shared house, I opened a bottle of the 2013 reserve we'd saved for a special occasion. I poured a glass, raised it toward the ceiling, and toasted the silence. 43 minutes later, almost the length of her Wednesday hotel visits, the bottle was half empty, my chest warm, my mind sharper than ever. Revenge hadn't been loud. It hadn't been violent. It had been patient, surgical. A scalpel disguised as a smile, a GPS tracker humming quietly in the dark. I hadn't screamed or broken or begged. I had let her write her own downfall, and then I had simply turned the page for her. Now, as I stood in the doorway of the garage one last time, I looked at the empty car space and felt the smallest of smiles tug at my lips. The symbol of her betrayal was gone. What remained was me, steady, unbroken, quietly victorious. I locked the door, turned out the light, and pocketed the key. The house no longer smelled of her perfume. It smelled of wood, dust, and something simpler, air untainted by lies. The world outside went on. Cars passing, neighbors laughing, the hum of life unbothered. And I stepped into it lighter than I had in years, carrying no weight but my own. Because sometimes revenge doesn't need flames or fury. Sometimes the sweetest victory is silence, an empty driveway, and the calm certainty that you will never be fooled again.